Well, well, today's going to be scary, ain't it? I'll be reacting to Llama Arts. If you did not know what Llama Arts is, as I slowly scroll through here, they are a horror channel. And today we are going to be reacting to Llama Arts. Llama Arts, I'm a fan. Right, like you can see me right now. Subscribe. And I hit all for the bell. I'm a big fan. Alright? Please don't demonetize me. Okay? I promise. I'm a fan. So, we're going to be looking at two today. We're going to be looking at My Roommate animated and then The Horn-Headed Man animated. Let's start off with The Roommate.
This video is sponsored by NordVPN. More details at the end. Looking for a new roommate is always a daunting task. Even though you interview and take the time to get to know that person, you don't truly find out who they are until you start living with them. I had begun searching for a roommate after I decided to leave my current residency. I was contacted a couple of hours after placing an ad on the Facebook Marketplace. The message read,
Hey Chris, I'll be moving out of my current apartment this August and I'm looking to room with someone new, as my roommates are moving to California this year. I'm 27 and I'm currently going to school. When I'm not at school, I enjoy hiking and watching movies. I also apprentice.
Okay, give me a second. I want to sit on my couch, so I'm just gonna. Is this good? Is this a good angle? Alright.
This at a taxidermy shop on the days I don't have class.
Okay.
Hope that's not weird. It's always been a fun hobby of
taxidermy.
mine. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. Have a great day, Lunaire.
I hate taxidermy.
My first and most obvious reaction after reading the message was to check her profile. She was of medium height, had long, messy blonde hair and green eyes. In her profile picture, I saw her standing with a man and a woman shoulder to shoulder. They each adorned goofy grins and held up peace signs. Under the photo, the caption read, "Love my roommates." I smiled to myself and decided to send her a message back.
Wait.
The sun beat down on us as we hoisted various objects to the second floor of our new apartment. It took us a couple days to get everything out of the moving trucks and into our new place, but as soon as we did, a wave of relief washed over our sweat-drenched and sore bodies. After a couple more hours of rearranging, we each grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the porch. We reminisced about old 90s cartoons and what video games we obsessed over as kids, and as the sun started to set, I truly felt relaxed and confident that things were going to work out. A week later, I started a new job for a construction company that was owned by a good friend of mine.
Okay.
As I was getting ready, I heard the front door swing open. I walked into the living room to see Lunaire and her friend David sliding in a large box.
Hey.
"What you got there?" I asked. Through a strained grunt, she replied,
I bought a freezer to store some of the animals I'm planning on using in my taxidermy work. I hope that's alright.
I mean, you just.
I was obviously hesitant at first, as there was no mention of this happening in the first place, but I eventually accepted and returned to my room to continue getting ready for work.
Okay.
I came home at around 9 p.m. after having a couple of beers with friends and noticed that the freezer was nestled snugly in the lower part of the pantry. A low hum could be heard reverberating off of the inner walls. I was curious to see what was inside, but didn't want to intrude on Lunaire's business, so I went into my room and changed into more comfortable clothing. After changing, I came back out into the kitchen and started making a sandwich. I opened the fridge and grabbed what I needed. As I turned around, I stubbed my toe on the edge of the island countertop and let out a long, exasperated grunt. Through my frustration, I slammed the fridge door shut and checked my toe to see if there was any bleeding. As I raised my head back up, I was greeted by a shadowy figure. Lunaire was standing in the doorway leading to her room. The darkness behind her almost seemed to envelop her.
Is everything okay?
she said in a deadpan tone. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just slammed my toe into the corner of the countertop as I was making a sandwich. I hope I didn't wake you.
It's fine.
She said in the same deflated tone as before.
Did or something.
She then turned around and walked back into the darkness of her room. I could tell that she was so I quietly made my sandwich and retreated back to my room as well, only hearing the low hum from the freezer as I closed my door. I had the next day off, so I was able to sleep in a little longer than usual. When I finally emerged from my room, I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast. As I opened the refrigerator, I noticed that the light wasn't turning on and there was a lack of cold air escaping from inside.
Oh.
I turned around and flipped the light switch to confirm my suspicion. Sure enough, the power was out. I muttered under my breath. I walked over to Lunaire's room and knocked on her door to tell her about the power outage if she didn't already know, but there was no answer. I then remembered that she had classes that day and probably wasn't home. I walked back to the kitchen and past the pantry. As I did, I slipped on the floor but was able to catch myself on the countertop. What the? I angrily exclaimed as I looked down at the floor trying to figure out what I had slipped on. It was blood. It had started to leak from the corner of the freezer and pool onto the floor. I quickly tried to open the freezer to find out the cause of the viscous liquid, but then I noticed that it had a padlock attached to it. I don't remember seeing that before.
Oh.
I ran out to my car and grabbed my toolbox from the back
Be
seat.
smart. Be smart.
I approached the freezer and set my tools down on the nearby countertop. I then pulled out a small pair of bolt cutters and snapped through the metal of the padlock. It fell to the ground with a large thud. I creaked open the top of the freezer and was greeted with a putrid stench that permeated my nostrils. I quickly pinched my nose and walked away gagging in response. I guess I should have realized that was gonna happen,
Yeah.
I muttered to myself in between gags. After gaining my composure, I grabbed some gloves from under the sink and started taking inventory. I could see a couple of dead birds
Okay.
and plastic bags wedged into the corners of the freezer. I took each bag out and set them in the trash can nearby. That's when I noticed that the blood was coming from the corner of the larger black bag. I don't know why, but I decided to open the top of the bag and peer inside. I was greeted by large, milky white eyes, a swollen black tongue surrounded by cracked and bloated lips, and the matted hair of a human head. I swiftly dropped the bag and fell backwards onto the floor. My breathing had ceased to exist, and I grabbed the trash can next to me and expelled my disgust into it. I then ran out the door, got into my car, and called the police. As I sat in the interrogation room with a blanket over my shoulders, I couldn't help but think about the face I'd seen. It looked so familiar.
Wait, what?
That's when it finally hit me. I pulled out my phone and looked at Lunaire's profile picture. It was her old roommate, the one she said was moving to California.
Oh my.
When the detective entered the room, she started the questioning process, asking me if I started noticing any weird behavioral occurrences around the apartment. Yeah, I stubbed my toe the other day and she creepily stood in the doorway. It seemed like she was but for some reason I had a strange feeling like she was concerned about something.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's when I connected the dots. She didn't come out into the kitchen because she heard me stub my toe. She came out into the kitchen because she thought I slammed the freezer instead of the fridge.
Oh.
A cold sweat started to form on my forehead as my surroundings became blurred. I could hear a low whine slowly starting to cover up the words of concern from the detective. As my vision started to clear, I could see another officer enter the room and whisper something into her ear as he handed her a piece of paper. "Do you have somewhere you could stay at?" she asked. I mean, I was planning on staying with my parents. They live about 30 minutes outside of town. Okay, she paused. Listen, I don't want to worry you, but we found this picture inside of your apartment. She slid the piece of paper across the table, and I immediately felt like someone kicked me in the chest.
What?
The head of Lunaire's other roommate sat on the chair. In the background, scrawled on the wall in blood, read, "Love my roommates." all of them.
Yo, what? Yo, what? That don't make no sense. That is scary. Actually, wait, guys, give me a second while I find another one. I said I was gonna do that one, but meh. Let's do a disturbing true Snapchat story 2, animated. It's only 2 minutes. Okay. That's not Snapchat did. If it was, we'd all be dead.
This is a short but terrifying story of something that happened when I was Snapchatting a friend. I'm pretty young, I'm only 13, still in middle school. A girl I really liked had just recently started snapping me selfie pictures, and we started messaging each other for a few.
Boy, what is that? Also, girl started snapping you? Good job. Sister, what is that? What is that?
What is that?
It looks like 2 buns with like a ginormous pickle in the middle with ketchup. And then like a piece of bologna at the bottom.
Few nights. One night when I was watching TV, she sent me a snap of herself laying in her bed without a caption. I sent a message saying what's up. She sent another identical picture, this time with a caption saying not much, you? She set the timer to 10 seconds, so it gave me plenty of time to analyze the picture, including her bedroom in the background, and the dark outline of a person standing by the window. I quickly sent a response message saying, "Is that your brother by the window?" She sent another identical snap, this time captioned, "What do you mean?" In this picture, the figure at the window was closer, and I could see a hand pressed up against the glass. I closed the snap before the timer even ran out so I could tell her quicker. I said, "There's somebody at your window, turn around." She opened my snap almost immediately, and that
You can see the picture before you send it. She's just send it, no, send. Like, you have to at least look. You see a dude behind you? You're dead, mate. Sorry for interrupting.
closed the snap before the timer even ran out so I could tell her quicker. I said, "There's somebody at your window, turn around." She opened my snap almost immediately, and then I didn't hear from her again on the app. I grew more and more worried as the minutes passed. I texted her a few times to no avail. I tried calling her a few times to no avail as well. I didn't know her house phone number, otherwise I would have called her parents. It wasn't until midnight when I was already laying in bed that she finally texted me back. She explained the whole situation. As soon as she looked at her window and saw the person standing there, she screamed, and that caused the person, who turned out to be a 20-something-year-old man, to open the window and jump into the room.
What the?
From there, she ran to her parents' room and woke her dad, who went to her room to find nothing but an open window. It wasn't exactly a personal story of mine, but it freaks me out nonetheless, knowing that the only thing that saved my friend from whatever could have happened was the fact that I was able to see the window through her selfies, unbeknownst to the creeper at her window.
Dang, dude. Wait, he said friend. Wait, if it's your friend, why does it say bae at the top? Ooh, okay, that's scary. We're gonna look at 2-sentence horror stories. Gonna look at 10. Jack, you still here? Okay, you're gonna save me if anyone ever comes down here. Let's read. I mean, why not?
was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. After that, I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my own scream.
Buried alive.
Number 2. I woke up to hear knocking on glass. At first, I thought it was the window, until I heard it come from the mirror again. Number 3. There was a picture in my phone of me sleeping.
Oh! Yeah, guys, I'm sorry. Don't call me casual. Or, hey, no, I'm not casual. Let's watch Christmas Eve horror story. I mean, what could go wrong Christmas Eve?
Last year on Christmas Eve, I was working late. I'm 23. I work in New York City and commute home every day on the train. Since I'm one of the younger ones in the office, I got stuck with one of the worst shifts, so I wasn't able to get home until 5 o'clock. My family had already left a whole hour earlier to go to my cousin's house, so I had to drive alone. After having a quick snack before the half-hour drive, I got back in my car and put my cousin's address into my phone. Halfway through the drive, it started snowing. I got to my cousin's house around 6 o'clock. It was snowing heavily by this point, and I just made it in time to catch everyone starting dinner. I brought all of my gifts inside and cheerfully said hey to everyone. I stayed until around 11 o'clock. The rest of my family left a little sooner. I stayed an extra half hour or so just to hang out before leaving myself. By the time I was leaving, the ground had accumulated at least 2 feet of snow, and it wasn't even done snowing. The drive home was nightmarish. The roads were hardly even plowed, and I had to drive under 20 miles per hour on most roads. The roads were completely dead at this point though, most likely because everyone was smart enough to go home before the snow accumulated. Eventually I turned onto a main road that I'm sure would usually be bustling, but at 11:15 on Christmas Eve night, there wasn't a single car or a single light from a store. It was a ghost town. But then I did notice the flashing taillights of one car. It was parked on the side of the road, and the smoke seeping out from its exhaust with the taillights giving it a red tint. As I got closer, I realized there was somebody next to the car waving their hand in the air. I assumed something was wrong and they needed help. So, me being the good Samaritan I am, I pulled up behind the car. When I opened my door, the guy approached me immediately, barely even giving me time to step out. He was an average-sized man, probably 5'10", 180 pounds. He spoke in a very demanding voice, asking me if I know anything about fixing an engine. I told him I didn't know much about cars. The guy responded very quickly to everything I said. He told me it's fine. He went inside of his car for a second, popped open his trunk, came back out, and told me to just wait by the trunk for a second.
No.
I had no idea what he wanted me to do. I was really confused. He walked over to the front of his car, and I heard him open the hood. I couldn't see anything he was doing since the trunk was blocking my view, and the loud wind of the snowstorm overpowered any small noises he might have been making. I put my hand on the back of the car and leaned my body in anticipation, when suddenly I heard 3 or 4 quick and aggressive footsteps in the snow behind me before I was pushed into the trunk. The man tried to close the trunk on me, but I kicked my feet up in resistance and held it up. I was able to overpower him and kick the trunk open completely. As I took advantage of the few seconds I had to get out of the trunk, I took out my keys. He tried to grab me now, and I dug my house key right into his neck. He fell to his knees and his scream echoed down the deserted street. I was in my car and halfway down the road before he could even get up from his knees. A little further down, I called 911 and reported the guy. I came back in 10 minutes to find blue and red lights illuminating the windows of the deserted stores. The police held him until the ambulance arrived for him. I watched the whole thing, and nothing ever felt better in my life. I got home safely half an hour later and told my family everything. I was still very shaken that Christmas, and this remains possibly the most horrific thing I've ever experienced.
Speaking of horrific, dang. Dang, dude. You know, we're gonna do one more. You wanna know why? Because I do it for y'all. You know what? I took my time getting back. So you know what? I'm gonna make a video and I deserve to for you guys. Alright, so we're gonna watch another one. I'm gonna cut ahead till I actually find another one. Alright, so we're gonna be watching House Sitting Horror Stories Animated. I think I might have heard about this one. I haven't watched any of these, to be honest. House Sitting Horror Stories. What the freak? I was expecting a jump scare though.
A couple weeks ago, my dad came home and pitched me a small job offer. One of his coworkers was going away for a few days and needed somebody he could trust to watch over his house. The reason my dad pitched this to me was because the man's house has a big CCTV system, basically a camera in every room, and then an operating desk where all screens could be watched on a big monitor. And I'm a computer science major, so my dad just always assumes that I know how to work anything technological. The man told my dad that he'd pay me $200 for the 2 days just to watch the house.
I'm doing it.
Whatever that meant. My dad drove me to the house and introduced me to the man, whose name doesn't matter. The man made it seem like he preferred I stay in the upstairs room with the monitors as opposed to roaming the house all day. That was fine with me though. So when I wasn't eating, I was mostly just sitting in that room with the TV on in the background and doing schoolwork on my laptop. Ironically, the thing I was doing the least was keeping an eye on the monitors.
Bruh.
Night came. I started wondering where in the house I should sleep, since surprisingly, we hadn't discussed that. So I sat back down at the desk and looked at all the different rooms on the screens to see which rooms had beds or couches. I noticed something I wasn't expecting to notice though. The back screen door was open downstairs. I didn't remember it being open. I looked through each and every camera screen in a panic. In the living room, a closet door was open. This one I knew wasn't open earlier. I texted my dad to call the man and ask him if he came back home. Meanwhile, I continued watching the screen. On the grainy, dark image, a tall person who resembled only a black shadow on the screen stepped out from the closet. I pulled my arms off the desk as I covered my mouth with my hands in shock. As I did this, however, my left elbow pulled some heavy object from the desk onto the floor, creating a big thud. The person in the image very clearly moved their head up to the ceiling as a response to the noise.
You're done, mate.
They went for the stairs, walking up very, very slowly, step by step. Meanwhile, I got a text back from my dad saying, "No, he's not. I just spoke to him half an hour ago." Why? I got so caught up in my phone texting my dad to send help that I didn't even pay attention to the monitor. There was a knock at the door. I looked at it and then the screens. The first screen I laid my eyes on was the one showing the person outside the door to the room I was in. When I remembered that door had no lock, the only thing I could think to do was jump out the window into the bushes below. I ran halfway down the block and then stopped when my dad called me. I had him call his friend and ask him if he was expecting somebody in the house. The man said he had no relatives or friends who had his key or would ever let themselves into his home. So he called the cops and had them review the footage. I got to watch all of it, and it showed everything. From the moment the intruder broke the glass to the backyard door, to the moment I jumped out the window and him running away shortly after. The intruder was never found. The footage was just too dark to identify his face.
Wow. Wow. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna watch a few more. 14 more horror stories animated. We're only probably gonna do like 5. Because this thing's 56 minutes long. True pizza delivery horror stories. Nice.
I was out doing a delivery one late night.
Okay.
It was probably the longest drive I had ever taken for a pizza delivery. From the pizza place I worked at, it was a 20-minute drive, which isn't too crazy out where I live.
Oh, okay.
Plus, they ordered 4 large pies, so I figured it was a party and I would get a much bigger tip.
Hopefully.
Navigating the dirt roads at night was always annoying though.
Yeah.
I pulled up to the given address. It was some old, sketchy-looking building, literally in the middle of a forest clearing. There were no cars parked anywhere, or any lights on.
I ain't going in.
I put my car in park and called my boss. I asked him to reread the address at least 3 times to make sure I typed it in right, but that checked out. I could tell he was in a really bitchy mood, and he told me to at least knock on the door and check it out. He would normally get mad if we took back 1 pie, but I was afraid of what he would do if I brought back 4. I was insanely unnerved, but got out anyway and forced myself to the front door of the building. There was no doorbell, so I just knocked really hard. I heard nothing and didn't really expect to hear.
You know how I would've done? Knock. No one's there. Drop pieces. I'm out. Peace.
Hear anything. I was extremely disappointed, not because nobody answered the door, but because I was realizing that it was all a waste of time and gas.
Yeah.
I knocked one more time out of desperation, and then began to hear some kind of rustling noises from inside of the building. I knocked again and yelled that I was the pizza guy.
Pizza man.
There was silence now. I felt a bit more uncomfortable now than before. But before I could turn around, I noticed something at the window. There was someone looking through the window. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. All I noticed were their eyes. Their eyes were open wider than I knew possible, staring intently at me. I was disturbed enough by this and dropped the pizzas and ran back to my car. It wouldn't start until turning the key for the 3rd time. I drove off the grass and back onto the dirt road, but I felt the car rocking about, shaking and bumping. Something wasn't right. I didn't make it far from the building before I started hearing a sharp scraping sound coming from outside. There was so much resistance that I couldn't even drive. The car came to a stop. I got out of the car to check what was wrong. A chill ran up my spine as I began to feel like my heart was constantly skipping beats. My tires had been slashed and had completely fallen off the rim. Not just the front though. All 4 tires were slashed. I realized somebody did this when I was knocking on the door to that building.
There's 2 people there?
Instead of running, I got back in the car and locked the doors.
That was your first
I was
mistake.
so close to that building, I could practically see it from where I was, if it weren't for the trees blocking the view.
Your first mistake was, number 1, knocking on the door twice. Second mistake was knocking on the door 3 times. Third mistake, staying in the car. You know, I'm going to solve all 3 of these right now, actually. First mistake could have been avoided. Just don't knock. Third mistake could have been avoided. Leave. Second one could have been avoided. Third one could have been avoided. Run, mate.
I dialed 911 and explained everything to the operator. She told me the cops would be over as soon as possible and that I need to stay hidden.
Cops always
I
take
asked her
forever.
if it was advisable to stay in the car or run,
Run.
and she told me it would be best to stay in the car with the door locked. She asked me to stay on the line with her until the cops arrived.
She's a cop, so I guess you
My whole body was shaking. In all directions, there was nothing but dark,
check
seemingly
everything.
endless
Check
forest.
rearview mirror.
I knew it would take forever for the cops to get there. I was not comfortable with sitting in that car so close to whoever did this. The next part, though, is what utterly destroyed me.
What?
It still shakes me to this day, and I hope nobody ever has to experience this kind of fear.
What?
As I was scanning all the windows, making sure nobody was outside, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was the same person.
No!
The same person I saw at that window. Eyes open wider than ever. I could see now that it was a woman, and I could ever so slightly see a smile begin to spread across her face. I opened my door and full-on sprinted into the woods, not caring how much noise I made. I ran until I was out of breath, which didn't take long, and I hid behind a giant log on the ground. I tried to cover my loud breathing with my hand, as I waited and waited for what felt like hours, until I finally heard sirens in the distance. I gathered up all the stamina I had left to run all the way back in the direction of the dirt road. Eventually, the glowing red and blue lights came into view, and I had never felt better in my life. They were parked in front of my car, investigating with flashlights. I came out yelling at them like a lunatic to help me. I fell to the floor and started to gag, almost throwing up from running so much. They picked me up and began to question me, to which I explained everything to the best of my ability. One of the two cars drove over to the building, and the two officers began to search the building. They came back with nothing except for a couple of spiky objects. These objects were exactly the same as the ones used to slash my tires. The cops guessed that it was some kind of sick, demented couple, being that I saw the woman, but unfortunately they were never found, and that still kills me to this day.
Dang.
I obviously quit my job right after that
Good.
and started working at a local grocery store.
Okay.
I know that I'll never forget seeing that woman at the back of my car.
Did y'all see that? True Home Alone Stories 3. Alright guys, this will be the last one.
I recently moved out, and I already have a horror story to tell. The house I moved into isn't anything impressive, it's just a house that's appropriate for one or two people. But I'd say right away, I started hearing weird sounds coming from inside the walls. I first heard it in the kitchen, and then in the bathroom, but on night 3, I started hearing it in my bedroom. I was sure there was some kind of animal living in my walls. I just had to figure out how to get rid of it. The next morning, I didn't even have enough milk to fill the bowl of cereal. I couldn't believe I hadn't realized I needed more milk. In fact, I seemed to be eating up all of my food pretty fast. I woke up in the middle of that night to the sound of breathing. Not my breathing. It sounded just like the breathing of a person. I flipped the lamp on and it stopped. I chalked it up as my mind playing tricks on me after waking up. The next day was really hot, so I turned on the AC for the first time. I checked every single vent, and some of them weren't blowing any air. One of them being the vent right next to my bed. I peered through the vent with a flashlight. There wasn't even a duct behind the vent. It was just the inside of the wall.
Oh.
It seemed that whatever air duct was in there had been removed. Unfortunately, I didn't look into the air conditioning system while buying the house, so I didn't know about this.
Just move.
That night, I had to sleep in the heat with no AC, so I was up pretty late, constantly rolling around and flipping the pillow over. Then I eventually started to hear the breathing again, but this time I was fully awake. I knew it was real this time. It was coming to my left. I looked to my left at the air vents. The sound was surely coming from in there. I grabbed the flashlight again and shined it in through the vent. I dropped it and screamed.
There was someone's face peering through the cracks of the vents.
Oh!
The first thing I saw were their eyes, open wide and glowing. I screamed all the way down and out the house. I soon found out there was a crazy, dangerous homeless man living in my walls, and he had been eating my food ever since I moved in.
Oh! Wow. Dang. Dang. Well, guys, that's where we're gonna end today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Man, these were creepy. First reaction Wednesday. How'd it go? I think it went pretty good. I would continue watching, but I think this video is already long enough. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Peace, my squids. Stay hanky.